Welcome back to Native Speaker. Here we're going to look at the but family, especially in how to use it for contrast, surprise, and exception. There are lots of various but-link words and phrases in English, and I'm going to show you 11 of them here. The first one we're going to look at is whereas, and the second one is while. Then we have although, even though, despite the fact that, and in spite of the fact that. Then we have a second grouping, apart from, with the exception of, except for, and other than. Now I want to mention a little bit about the pronunciation here. Some of them are quite easy to pronounce, but we do come across difficulties from time to time among students. So whereas, and yes, all one word. While, and yes, it has the same spelling as the word while when it means when and during, but here it has a different meaning. This word, although, so it's all like football and though like Homer Simpson's favorite word. Though! Okay? So that's although, even though, and then though. Then we have a despite the fact that, and this phrase here, in spite of the fact that. Then we have another category, which is apart from, and don't forget apart is two words, with the exception of, except for, and other than. Some of our European students often have trouble pronouncing this word. It's exception. And this word also presents some difficulties for students. This is except for. Now you'll notice that the T can be dropped a little bit. We're not really supposed to do that, but we do. Okay? So it should be except for, but in real life, native speakers compress a little bit, and it's sometimes pronounced except for, like the number 4 almost. So except for. Of course, it should be except for, but don't tell anybody I told you that, but we do tend to drop the T in compression. Now, the main difference between all of these words and phrases is their usage, why we use them. Well, whereas is used to contrast, and while is used to contrast. So that's to show the difference between two things, for example. Although is also used to contrast, but it has a second job, which is to show surprise. Even though is used to show surprise, though is used to show surprise, despite the fact that is used to show surprise, and in spite of the fact that is used to show surprise. As regards pronunciation of this phrase, try to remember it's in spite of the fact that. In spite of the fact that. A little bit like Spider-Man. So I always say that to my students. It sounds like the theme music to the old Spider-Man series. Spider-Man. So in spite of the fact that. In spite of the fact that. So try not to say in spite of the fact that. It sounds a little bit robotic. So try and avoid that. The usage over here for these 4 phrases, well, these are very good if you want to say that there's a big difference, that almost everything or everybody in the group is one way, and then a very small percentage is another way. So I've called these phrases the 99% 1% group. Now, it's not really 99 to 1%, but I'm using that to help you remember. So it's like the majority is one way, and then there's a very small percentage a different way. And I'll show you examples of that. Okay? So let's move the usage out of the way, and let's look at how we can build a sentence. So in our first statement here, you're going to build it by using a subject, a verb phrase, an object, and a complement. Then you'll split the sentence with a comma, and you will put in a second statement which will have a subject, a verb phrase, and an object. Let's look at some examples. Whereas some people use smartphones to check movie times, others check them in the paper. So others here is another way of saying people. So students don't always realize that in order to avoid repeating the word people, you can sometimes say others. Okay? Now, these are used to contrast how people use their phones. One group can check movie times on their smartphones, and other groups check them in the paper. While Daewoo mostly produces cars, Range Rover manufactures 4x4s, so this is used to contrast as well. Then, although teenagers sometimes listen to music on Spotify, over 30s tend to listen to music on iTunes. So people over 30 years of age are often called over 30s. So here we're contrasting these. Then let's show some surprising information. Even though athletes have to go to the gym regularly, they still actually have to get plenty of rest. So we don't always imagine athletes lying in bed, but as part of their training, they often have to lie down and let their body rest. And you'll see here that we have a partner phrase, still actually. So you don't have to use these words, but they're two words that are signal words that help with the whole idea of showing surprise. The even though plus this helps us to reinforce the idea of that is something slightly surprising. Now, when I say surprise, I don't mean it's shocking. I mean it's something that you might not have expected. Okay, the next one. Though Mike was working in downtown Washington during the riots, riots is when people are running on the streets, breaking windows, etc. He didn't actually see any violence. So again, we've used actually to help with the surprise. So he was in a very dangerous area, but surprisingly, he didn't actually see any violence. Again, showing surprise. Despite the fact that the team had enough players to easily win the match, they actually lost it. So I included actually again. Pronunciation actually. Actually. Good. And then the last one, in spite of the fact that the government provides some support for the homeless, this is still actually a huge problem. Again, the government are giving money and help for the homeless, and we're surprised to hear that it's still actually a huge problem. Still suggests that it continues and actually reinforces the surprise. So if I said to you, you're from America, aren't you? You might say, no, actually, I'm not, because you're not American. Okay, and now for the but link here showing the 1%, 99% difference. We have the 1% first, the 99% second, and then we'll have a comma in the middle here. So the 1% will be a subject, your first subject, and then the 99% will be subject to, plus a verb phrase, plus an object. So, for example, apart from Braveheart, very few movies focus on Scottish history. With the exception of Marco, all the staff use Samsung products. Except for Fox News, most US news networks support the Democrats. And other than Ursula, all the class were from Spain. And then you just close it off with a full stop. And that's how you can use this in the first way. You have to build it in a certain way and watch your pronunciation. So replay the video again and you can have a look at how to build the video. So I'm going to show you very quickly one other aspect of using these phrases, and when you're building them you sometimes have to use a gerund subject at the beginning of the phrase, and this often causes confusion for students. Okay, so the construction will be the same, except we're going to use a verb ing. So whereas using bleach to clean surfaces is quite effective, vinegar is more natural. While driving a car is quite easy on main roads, doing so off-road can be challenging. Although teaching teenagers can be quite enjoyable at times, it can also be pretty draining. Even though learning a language can be pretty tiring at times, it is also quite rewarding. Though having children can be a pretty big responsibility in terms of finance, it is a great experience. Despite training the team to work together every night for years, the coach was fired after they lost. And in spite of losing trillions of dollars gambling on the stock market for years, comma, the banks were still helped by the state. So here you can see a verb ing is also possible immediately after these phrases. The difference here for despite and in spite of is that we cut off a lot of the phrase. Instead of saying despite the fact that, we have now cut off the fact that, and we're just going directly to verb ing. In spite of the fact that becomes in spite of, and we go directly to ing. We do not add the subject over here. No. We go directly to verb ing, and this is a common mistake. The but link has a slightly different construction. We say apart from, and then a gerund subject, subject to, the verb phrase, and we close it off again with a full stop. So, apart from being in Heathrow Airport, comma, I have never been to London. So you've never gone to see the city, but you've sat in the airport, possibly in Heathrow. With the exception of doing judo in school, comma, Maria had no martial arts experience, and except for seeing it in movies, comma, most of us rarely see gun violence. And other than playing tennis, comma, I don't get much exercise these days. And then, of course, we remember the usage over here to contrast and show surprise. And then again, these are used to show something that's mildly surprising that you might not have been expecting. And then the usage over here is the 99%, 1% difference. That's a phrase I've used just to help you understand that I have never been to London except for in Heathrow Airport. So you can put the but link here. In another presentation, I'll show you how these can go in the middle, but for now I wanted you to see that they can go at the front, and I think that shows a lot of skill by the students. But now, as you can see here, it's pretty easy. It's not rocket science. So all you have to do is get some practice. That's all from me, and I'll see you all next time.